Video games are amazing things. They can tell some of the most effective stories due to you spending so much time in some aspects, are the character. They can deliver more gripping and emotional stories than any movie could ever tell. It has personalization, and sometimes they can be a massive challenge where enormous feats can come from being a boss or a room in a game. They are so wonderful. So why not shove them on a piece of cardboard? Video game board games are a strange anomaly in this world of ours, despite— Oh god, they're back. Anyway, despite everyone playing a board game at some point in their lives, whether it be Monopoly or Snakes and Ladders, the wider spread of board gaming is surprisingly niche. Like, outside of Hasbro games, can you name more than like 5 which aren't just versions of trivia, which seem to be really popular? I can, but that's only because I got introduced to this niche literally earlier this year. So what happens when you combine 2 niches nobody knows about? You get video game board games, which not many people know about. You don't count. For purposes of not covering a million versions of Monopoly, I'll be excluding any Monopoly variants because they aren't really video game board games, more just tie-ins. They are also worse than actual Monopoly a lot. Another thing which I won't be including is card games, which may seem obvious, but they're often lumped in with board games, so no. Maybe in the future I could talk about them. Anyway, here I have 8 games of varying who, what? And wait, that exists? This is such a strange family photo. But before we get to that, because apparently you should transition between points, lame, we need to talk about arcade games. Arcade gaming entered a golden age in 1978 after the release of Space Invaders by Tite. It nearly single-handedly revived the arcade game from kind of just existing for a couple of years prior to an actual hobby that people can have. Over the next 5 years, many of the most iconic arcade games were released, such as Galaga, Centipede, and Asteroid. These were all popular and still had some worth now. In the same year that the game released in, the first video game board game ever created, to my knowledge, Pac-Man, was first published by Milton Bradley. I have the first 3 video game board games they published, if I could actually see the exact dates, not the year in a Wikipedia article, so it would be more accurate to say 3 out of the first 5. There are around 17 games under Milton Bradley that were based off video games. Some of them I don't have because these alone costed me $200. Include Centipede, Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario Bros, and Miss Pac-Man. So back to Pac-Man. It's a 4-player game where you move around the board while trying to eat as many pellets as possible and not being eaten by the ghost. Before I get in depth, I'd like to reflect on how much stuff is missing from the version I bought. It was around $60 and was missing a ghost of Pac-Man, 2 power pellets, the instructions like 16 regular pellets, and was such bad condition the box looks disgusting. I won't complain because it's old, but as we see later, I got a tad ripped off. Seller on eBay even tried to partially refund me because I rated it kind of low. Anyway, the missing stuff was a bit annoying, but I improvised. With your Demon Pac-Man, as stated earlier, you have to eat as many pellets as you can, and whoever has the most wins. You move by rolling 2 die. One of the dice that you're choosing decides how many spaces you move your pack, and the other one you get to move your ghost. I actually really like this a lot. The fact you have to control both yourself and the ghost on your turn is actually really cool. It adds so much strategy to the game. You can use your high number to collect more pellets as you roll around the board, or you can kill a Pac-Man and steal their pellets at the expense of less movement. You don't even have a specific ghost to control, you can control either in your turn. This comes my first and really only complaint about the game outside of luck, but literally every board game has luck, and I'm not too fussy about that, except for something we'll get to later. But I feel like the board is just a tad small for the dice. The ghost can go up to 6 spaces, which covers a lot of the board, so there's very little safe area. This does add a lot of risk reward, which is nice, but I feel like if there was just one more spot around the edge, it would be a lot better. If you kill someone with a ghost, you get to steal 2 of their pellets, which is a fair reward. Keeps them in the game but penalizes them just to the right extent. The other way you can steal pellets is by eating power pellets. When you eat them, which let's talk about that and get side tangent again, these things, you can actually eat the pellets with how their mechanism works. It's tad fiddly to get it properly initially, but it is really cool effect. They have these little plastic holes on the bottom which let stuff get through with enough pressure. I like this, but I'm just a little bit nervous about the longevity of the plastic since it probably isn't the best thing for it. Back to the power pellets, you store them until you want to use them. When you do, you can eat the ghosts by running them over. This allows you to steal 2 marbles from any player. Afterwards, you return the ghost to the center and the power pellet to the spot it was on originally. Now you might ask, why don't I just keep the power pellets and just not risk rolling high enough? It's because they don't actually count towards your final total, which I think is pretty neat. Overall, I believe Pac-Man is quite a good board game. Especially to the average person who likes Monopoly, it's balanced and there aren't really any repetitive strategies that I can think of which makes the game uninteresting. So if you can find a copy in better condition and want to have a go, I would recommend it. As an adaptation though, it's still pretty good. Aside from the board not really being accurate, I believe it transformed Pac-Man into a board game as well as you really could, besides these demon summons. Pac-Man must have been a success for the company because they decided to continue on with creating board game adaptations with Frogger, which is the only game these are based off, which I have not played. It's all about getting frogs to the end of whatever this is. Frogger is a 2-player exclusive game, which is quite unusual. Usually it's 2 to 4 players, but it makes sense. You roll the die and try to get all your frogs to the end. This game was only $45 and was in much better condition than the $60 Pac-Man. Only a couple small things were broken and a frog was missing, so mini Snuggles saved today. Now, to the game. One thing I have to mention is the fact I really dislike putting this game together. They use these little barriers as well as lines on the board to make the grid you move through, but I'm sorry, this is just disgusting to put together. You have to essentially bend the plastic to actually get it to go in the hole, and when straight in, it puts pressure on the cardboard, wearing it away. This really hurts how long the game can last and creates this unavoidable scuffing effect. The game itself is okay, but a lot weaker than Pac-Man. You have a custom dice, which is neat. You have basic movement with 1, 2, and 3 being possible. You also have 2 special icons, which let you flip a log over to reveal a fly, or forces every frog to move forward 2 spaces. This game feels a lot more luck dependent than Pac-Man due to the fact you can only move the logs forward and to the sides, and the fact that there is 1 dice. Now whatever you roll determines how many things you can move. You can move any piece on the board aside from your opponent's frogs, which is pretty neat. You can move the logs and car however you want, but how you move them I don't like. With one move you can essentially move them anywhere on their line, which is so weird. You're essentially forced to get a high roll to even start playing the game, because if you get hit by a log or car, you go back to the start. You can stand on logs, which allows people to actually beat the game, but what this causes to happen is that people just jump along the corners to progress. I did play a game like this, and I wasn't a big fan. Whenever I played it, I made it so that the dice roll was only how much you could actually move the actual thing. And it worked better, but it still isn't great. Overall, this game is a lot more underwhelming than Pac-Man. It's probably decent on an adaptational level, but I haven't played Frogger, so I can't really say. Finally, the newest one, if you ignore that Pac-Man is a reprint. Yeah, Frogger interestingly has a different box layout on the sides compared to the other two, and has completely different back with the instructions on it, which is a very interesting way to include rules without extra paper. Anyway, Donkey Kong! Ah! Okay, cool, we don't need sexualized monkey getting the age restriction police on us. This one is about the middle quality-wise. You land on orange spaces to get point cards, which you can use when running into or being hit by barrels to score points. Whoever has the most points when someone reaches the top wins. You have 2 dice to roll, 1 to move Mario, Gario, Blario, or Steve, and 1 to move the barrels. I really like that this, as it adds a lot of variation to how the game will play out due to the different ways the barrels can be patterned, and it somewhat eliminates some luck that the monkey dice roll by being able to anticipate where they will go during your turn. This adds a lot of strategy to the game and some risk reward, especially with more players. Since you lose points when hit from barrels, if you don't have a points card, you can risk staying on a girder and hope you don't get hit, or hope you get hit but not too much to use your point cards, or go onto a ladder and stay safe. This adds so much risk reward, which is so cool. The board itself is decent. The orange dots, which are where you can collect the point cards, feel odd. They just feel randomly scattered, and they work fine. Just feels odd that it wasn't something more natural to get the points cards. There is a lot of variation in the board, with there being lots of paths to get up to the top of the board. My main issue with the game are the barrels, which ruin some of the desire to come back to the game. We'll start with the good bit with the barrels and talk about the ape himself, Donkey Kong. You put the barrels into his hand facing up, and you press down his arm to dispense them. This little mechanism, while simple, is so cool and satisfying. I commend 1882 Milton Bradley for this simple but very fun mechanism. The bad part about the barrels is how many there are. There is so many on the board at once. While it keeps the hecticness and the fun of the game, it also harms it more than it helps. Just having to move every barrel down is tedious to accomplish. You have to keep track of which ones you have moved, which is quite difficult to do, especially when you want more people moving them to try and keep the pace of the game up. This is a main detractor and what makes it weaker than Pac-Man. I still enjoy my time with this game, I kinda just wish it was to a greater extent. Finally, I want to talk on the condition of this. It's really damn good compared to the others. It has everything besides the rubber band, which is easily replaceable in the box, and is in really good condition. This was the most expensive expensive board game at about 100 AUD, but the quality nearly made it worth it. Those are the classic board games I own. They're all pretty traditional in how they work, interestingly. Like, I could see some rando on the street playing this. They're all pretty simple, but not too simple. They are all better than a lot of the traditional board games like Monopoly and Snakes and Ladders. Now, how do I transition to the weirdo trio? Mobile games! Yeah, I'm not a fan. Modern game mobile games are really not my thing. Quite often they're filled with microtransactions or ads and are generally designed to be addictive and on top of the App Store charts for a week, so I don't play many. The only ones I've played somewhat recently are the PvZ games, Balloons games, and some random ones that I've already deleted so I can't show you. Now, not a lot have board games, but a lot of the old, more nostalgic ones do, like Candy Crush. It wasn't made available in Australia. So what about Where's My Water, a classic made by Disney, interestingly enough, and it wasn't made in Australia. Crossy Road, made by one guy that doesn't have an arcade version. What about that board game? There isn't one. Not got Jetpack and Joyride. Jetpack and Joyride is probably the mobile game I have least experience out of with all these mobile games I've mentioned. It's an infinite runner where you try to get as far as possible and try not to die. In the board game, you're given 4 boards which create your path, and you have to quickly scramble to create a path, getting as many points as possible. Once someone gets to the end of every sector, everyone else scores and the points are tallied up. This game is surprisingly designed extremely well. It's genuinely quite shocking. The pieces are all in around 5 different shapes, and the boards are designed perfectly to match the pieces. It always feels like there is a piece that you can use to do what you want. The only thing preventing you from realizing this is the franticness of trying to get as many points as quickly as possible, because your opponent's speed is the timer. And this creates a surprisingly skill-based board game, which is unusual for board games. Skill and strategy is often required, but luck is still a massive player. Here, skill and strategy outweighs the luck because of how few randomized elements there are, and if they are randomized, of how balanced they are. The main elements of this game which contain lucks are the boards, which is not really a luck thing, like it is, but just let me explain. It's pretty much a layout randomness inside a game, but the variance in the board game does feel pretty balanced. Some are easier than others for sure, but it never feels like someone won because they got lucky. It always felt like they got it because they were able to find a quick path quicker. The second way is through missions, which give you extra points if you complete them. These are the main things that might be more difficult depending on your board. Each card has a point value of 3 to 5. I do like this because it makes getting the most amount of points harder, and maybe missing coins, which is the main way to get points, may be worth it, adding more strategy. It also helps the game not get tiring and stale after a little bit. Finally, you have items, which are okay in my opinion. There are quite a few. While they do have an effect on the points and the potential performance, I just feel like they could be excluded. They do add some variation, but it's a lot less prominent. Or at least I feel it's a lot less prominent. The game is also quite small, making it pretty portable, but at some expense. Personally would like the little boards to be sturdier, as they feel too card-like and cheap. I have found while playing the game that they can move around a bit, misaligning the pieces, which can get kind of annoying. Overall, Jetpack Joyride is a great skill-based board game. There is strategy, minimal luck, and lots of variation to keep the game interesting. From the board structure alone, there is 16,384 board combinations. After that many games, I might start getting repetitive. Did you know this existed? The Skylanders board game kinda sucks. A lot. So you spin this wheel to determine you can place one of these rings around the Skylanders. You need 4 row to win. This game is entirely luck. There is a single thing that removes any strategy you could possibly have. It's the fact that you have every player occupy one tile. Yeah, unlike in Act 4, you can't lock out people with the spots. They can just go there, making it so whoever gets the better spin wins. This is absolutely absurd design decision. I found that playing it where tiles do get occupied by the player who used it last is more fun and adds a smidge more strategy, which makes it a bad design because if playing the game incorrectly makes it more fun, there is a good chance that it's either really funny to play that way, or the original design is very flawed, which is the case in this scenario. God, that was too short. I just don't have any more to say. That darkness is concerning. Let's just get a move on with the final game in the Weirdo Trio. You know Wendy's? Yeah, I don't know them either. We don't have them in Australia. They make a kids meal Kirby board game. Yeah, board game which came in a kids meal. If you're wondering how I got it, it cost me about $70 in total. I'm an insane person with money. Now, this is based on the Kirby Right Back anime, which is an anime which ran for 4 seasons. I am technically breaking my own rules, shush. You know Candyland? I don't, but it's a mini Kirby version of it. You just pick up a card and move that many spaces first to the end, who wins one of the 2 boards. I can see why people despise Candyland now. Picking up cards isn't as cathartic, I think that's the right word, as rolling dice. At least when rolling dice feels like you have an influence over your future and how far you'll move. Here it's all predetermined, so it just doesn't feel like anything. Leaves your soul empty. Genuinely, it is probably the worst game I've purchased for this thing. So far, I've spent $375 on this, including shipping. That amount is gonna get a lot worse with our final 2 board games. I'm gonna class them as big honkin' box games, which will go with the one I have more experience with first, which is Stardew Valley, the board game, which cost me about $80. That's $455 spent on board games. This is the first cooperative board game of the day, my first ever cooperative board game. You're stranded in Stardew Valley, and you have to rebuild the community center by completing bundles and completing Grandpa's life goals or something. This is pretty much the goal of regular Stardew, excluding the Grandpa's last wishes thing. Before we can get on how to play, I must mention that this game is quite complicated. There's no way I'm going to be able to get everything about this game into this one section, especially since it's around 20 minutes already. So I may mention things which just make no sense because this rulebook's like 14 pages long. You have 3 phases to every turn. You have the planning phase where you turn over the season card to show what happens at the start of the day, and then you plan your actions on whatever you do on your turn. Some start of day actions include rain, which makes your crops grow faster, crows, which remove crops, and fish tide changing, which changes what fish you can catch. This helps create a different season layout, which could be beneficial or unbeneficial. It has to make you plan for any possibility. It also helps prevent the game from being stale, especially when the game presents to you a different seasonal event, such as the flower dance or the dance of the Moonlight Jellies. The second phase is the movement phase, where you get to enact out the plan of the previous phase. You get 2 actions every turn and 1 space to move, which you have to use wisely to try and get what you need to be able to properly win the game. You can't just mine all the time, as that may lose you the game and it prevents you from collecting forageables, which are usually required to beat the game. The main issue I have with the move phase is due to how religiously the board game reflects the actual game. It makes the board design suffer a little bit. It makes some forageables very unlikely to be unearthed due to the fact that Marnie is in between pond fishing in the town, and the only thing you can do at Marnie's is buy animals, which you can only do if you've bought the appropriate building from Robin. This is like my only complaint with the map structure though. This game, if you can tell from the descriptions I've been using, adapts the game extremely well. All of the Pelican Town area is represented on the board, and there's a lot you can do with the different segments of a town. You've got the fishing locations, Clint's Geodes, the museum, the bar, Pierre's shop, and they're all used well. You also have all the major mechanics, well, I guess that isn't the best word, more like things to do such as fishing, farming, mining, and foraging. The only turn-off for people might be that the outcome of quite a few things in this game are determined by the dice roll. 2 major ones being fishing and mining, which I'm pretty sure both required to do the same extent in this game. Fishing is required to complete the fish tank bungle shocker, and mining is most likely needed to complete the... They both also have a chance to be required for Grandpa's goals. I personally don't mind it too much because just about every game we've played, yes, a little bit has felt due to the dice roll, but part of it is just because we didn't do things optimally. Grandpa's goals, they're mostly fine, but they fluctuate in difficulty significantly. For example, one of them is to make 3 friends times the amount of players. This may seem difficult, but you need hearts to reveal the bundles. The main and most efficient way to get hearts is through friendship. If you were to do it optimally in a single player setting, you'll need to at least have 2 friends to reveal every bundle. And to do that, you'll need to make sure you get 2 people who love whatever you actually have in your inventory, and it's the month of their birthday, which doesn't always happen. Another goal is to get to the level 12 of the mine, which is the bottom level. Perfectly in a single player game, it would take 12 actions out of the 32 overall ones. That is a very large difficulty spike from the friendship one. Finally, you have the end of turn phase, which allows you to perform a few different actions. Aside from that one tangent about Grandpa, this is a really great board game. This is definitely the best video game board game I brought on an adaptational level and a fun level, which means we can only go down from here. I'm making it sound like the next board game is absolutely terrible. It's just good, not as good as Stardew. Finally, we have the Dark Souls of all board games. Dark Souls the board game. Well, I mean, I'm not wrong, you can't argue with that. This was the most expensive board game, costing me $180. This was being used once. If I got it brand new, it would have costed $200. Overall, all these board games combined cost me $606. Oh my god, I'm really bad at how I spend my money. Now the game's rules. Yeah, I'm gonna have to summarize them a lot because this is even more complicated. I'm probably going to talk quite generally about a lot of this stuff because I think that'll take about an hour to properly discuss the game. The main thing I'm going to criticize is the fact that a lot of things feel like footnotes when they are really important. One of these being the fact that at the end of an encounter you get a full heal. We completely forgot about this rule, we being me and my sister. We played it like you didn't get this healing. This has been a constant with the times we've played. Due to the hefty amount of rules, it's near inevitable you're gonna get some. You, or you and up to 3 friends, battle through a bunch of rooms of enemies to get to and kill the boss. The regular game has about 2 different phases I think you can call them, I don't know. First phase, at the end, has a mini boss, and the second has a final boss. This is a pretty okay system if you have the time for it. Often these games go for what feels like an hour for the first half of the game. Another big time sink is the second up, which took me like half an hour to do the first time. The combat in normal enemy encounters works pretty well. Each turn you can move and make one attack with any additional actions costing stamina. This works really well with the node system they are using. The main flaw is that the boards feel a tad small, especially with how some enemies can move up 2 spaces per turn, which makes it really annoying to run and avoid because they can travel half the map in one turn, which just feels too unfair to me. Aside from that, in the basics they work well. I start having issues in practice though. It often feels like a lot of these base encounters and base equipment don't really work well at all. You can have a level 1 encounter where you have to roll 2 2s, which doesn't sound difficult. However, the black die, which are the basic ones, have 1 0 on them, 3 1s and 2 2s, so in practice, if you pick the assassin as your main class, you're kind of screwed if you get an armored knight due to it being practically impossible to kill them with your base attack. You do have a secondary attack, but that requires 3 stamina, and makes it easy, but the odds are still quite low. That's my main complaint with this game, luck. I know it's as stable as tabletop RPGs, which this is trying to be one of them in a way where luck is surprisingly frequent, but I feel like here it's significantly worse than something like D&D. Starting equipment you get here cannot satisfy you for the entire game, as there is a chance you get no useful items, which we nearly did when we played this game properly because we completely forgot the first time you could buy equipment. That wasn't fun, and made the Tite demon practically impossible. However, despite this luck, it was decently fun. It was so satisfying when an encounter went really well, but it was fairly annoying when they went so badly you'd have to use one of your Estus flasks. That kinda sucked. The bosses are where the game feels the most unfair. They, unlike normal enemies, have an attack pattern with multiple attacks, which is a very nice way to make the boss feel harder, but still reasonable. Too bad they have 24 health compared to the 1 most enemies have, and 5 for the powerful ones. This just feels incredibly unfair, especially when you haven't fought any bigger enemies previously. This isn't helped by the ridiculous defensive values, which can go up to 3, which some weapons can't even hit. In fact, most of the base weapons can't hit without the use of stamina, which may be an impossibility depending on the health situation of a player. This just feels incredibly brutal when the rest of the game had challenge, but still felt mostly fair despite the luck. The bosses just feel unfair in general, which is very disappointing. Overall, despite the criticisms, it was okay. As an adaptation and as a board game. Nowhere near the $180 which I bought it for. You could buy 3 copies of Dark Souls Trilogy with that money, which is the main problem most video game board games have. Often the game it's based off is a similar price, cheaper, or not that much more, and often has more content to them and much more time you can sink into them. Oh god, this entire thing was awful, wasn't it? Oh god, terrible. Why do I do this?
Man, I swear, the one time I get invited to do something, I get lost. I have this rate, I'll miss it, and what is? So, oh no, Gamma.
Go away.
Wait, hold on, wait, Gamma, wait, just what's going on? What's wrong?
Go away.
No, like seriously, what's up? You look sort of down right now. Is everything all right?
I'm good for nothing. I suck at the only thing I try to be more creative with. It's horrible. I'm good for nothing.
Oh, well, I personally like it.
You do?
Yeah, I've come here for like the past few months, and every time you do one of these things, you put effort and stuff into it, and you really do seem to care doing it. I just think that you're being too hard on yourself right now, that's all.
Yeah, I just always feel like I don't belong, and I'm trying to enact some fantasy where I'm good, and I just don't think I'm cut out. What I do is absolute garbage, and I'm just lying to myself thinking it's not.
Well, it's like I was saying earlier, right? You just care so much about these talks and you just want to see them be the best that they can be. And that kind of effort, personally, that's something I can admire. Something that I could truly appreciate in a creator, you know?
Thanks. I think I just need to work on self-esteem and stuff. Oh, hey, the trees disappeared.
Yeah, I guess they did, didn't they? It just looks like they sure up and leafed, you know?
Well, thanks again. I think I'm just gonna take a break for a bit and probably start working for something big for my return. So, see ya, I guess.
Alrighty then, Gammasaurus. You take care and have fun with all that now. I'll see you then. Wait, I still missed it, didn't I?